That was the color of my new world. A white that hurt the eyes, a white that smelled of antiseptic and sadness. The white of the walls, of the starched sheets, of the nurses' uniforms. The white of the face that the mirror returned to me. Room 703, Asan Medical Center. My name, Kang So-yeon, written on a plastic bracelet that felt like a chain. 21 years old. My life, once a vibrant canvas, was now confined to this blank and soulless canvas. The sound of charcoal on thick paper in my memory. The water mixing with watercolor, creating a miniature universe in my dreams. The rhythmic and cruel sound of the vital signs monitor. That was my reality. Just a few months ago, my biggest worry was turning in my final project for my art degree on time. My hands smelled of turpentine and oil paint. My nails held traces of all the colors of the rainbow. I remembered the feeling of the sun on the back of my neck as I painted outdoors in the Han River Park, laughing with my friends, sharing a spicy tteokbokki that made us cry and laugh at the same time. My world was color, texture, movement. Now, my hands were clean, pale, perforated. The only smell was that of hand sanitizer and the saline solution that dripped ceaselessly into my veins. Laughter felt like an echo from someone else's life. Non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The doctor's words had sounded distant, as if I were listening to them underwater. My mother collapsed. My father, a man of few words, just squeezed my shoulder with a force that betrayed his panic. I went blank, like my canvases before the first brushstroke. Only this time, I didn't feel the excitement of the beginning, but the emptiness of the end. The door to room 703 opened with a dry click, without warning. It was him, Professor Kim, a man of about 50, with an impeccable bald head and glasses that magnified his severe gaze. He was always flanked by an entourage of residents and students who followed him like ducklings, noting his every word on their tablets. He didn't walk, he paraded.
Kang So-yeon.
His voice was as sterile as the room.
This morning's blood results. Leukocyte levels stable within the expected range post-chemotherapy. Nausea is a common side effect of the RCHOP protocol. Drink fluids.
He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the tablet held by one of the residents. I was a set of data, an evolution chart, a case study. I wasn't a 21-year-old girl who missed the smell of paint. Professor, I started to say, my voice a hoarse whisper. When will I be able to?
Your treatment consists of 8 months, as was already explained to you. Your initial response is positive. Do not get ahead of events. Discipline is key in recovery.
And without another word, he turned on his heel and left, followed by his silent retinue. The door closed, leaving me again in the silence, broken only by the beep, 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 and the buzz of my own humiliation. I shrank into the bed, feeling smaller than ever. A single hot tear rolled down my cheek. Discipline. As if being here were a choice, as if my body hadn't betrayed me. Just then, the intravenous stand began to emit a sharp, annoying beep. An alarm. Probably an air bubble or a blockage. It happened often. It irritated me with an impotent fury. It was another reminder that nothing in my life worked as it should. not even the damned plastic tube that was keeping me alive. I pressed the nurse call button, knowing they would take a while to come. They were always busy. I moved, trying to adjust the tube myself, but only managed to make the beeping more insistent. Damn it, I muttered through my teeth, frustrated, on the verge of crying again over something so stupid. The door opened again, but this time softly. It wasn't the authoritarian click of Professor Kim. It was a light push, almost timid. A young man, taller than the professor, peeked in. He wore the same white coat, but on him, it didn't look like armor, but work clothes. His black hair was a bit messy, as if he had run his hand through it several times. He must have been just over 30. His name tag read, Dr. Ji-hoon, Hematology.
Excuse me,
He said, and his voice surprised me. It was calm, deep but soft. It didn't have the coldness of metal, but the warmth of wood.
I heard the alarm from the hallway. Trouble with the IV?
I nodded, unable to speak, pointing at the tube that was beeping like a crazy bird. He smiled. It wasn't a condescending or professional smile. It was a genuine smile, which crinkled the corners of his eyes a little. He approached the bed.
Let's see, you little troublemaker.
He said to the machine, not to me, and that small detail made me blink. I expected the same brusque and efficient treatment as always. A tug, a quick adjustment, and goodbye. But Dr. Lee Ji-hoon was different. He leaned in, and for a moment, the impersonal smell of the hospital was replaced by a very subtle scent of coffee and clean of soap, the smell of normalcy. His hands moved towards the IV connection on my arm, and then I felt it. His fingers were long and deft. He didn't grab my arm as if it were an object. His left hand rested with incredible lightness near my elbow to stabilize it, and its warmth filtered through the thin fabric of the hospital pajamas. It was a professional touch, yes, but it wasn't cold. There was a consideration in it, a delicacy that took me by surprise. With the other hand, his fingers worked on the plastic tube with astonishing precision. There were no tugs, no sudden movements that would make me flinch in pain. Every movement was fluid, sure, calm.
It's just a small air bubble.
He explained in a low voice, still looking at what he was doing. Sometimes it happens if the drip is too fast. It's nothing serious, but the machine is very loud. I looked at him. I looked at his long eyelashes, the concentration on his face, the way his brow furrowed slightly. He wasn't treating a clinical case. He was helping a person. And at that moment, as his fingers accidentally brushed the skin of my forearm while adjusting the adhesive tape, a strange warmth spread from that point to my chest. It was like the flutter of a butterfly, a tiny sensation, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. In the midst of the white desert of my despair, in the midst of the pain, the nausea, and the fear, that small gesture, that unexpected delicacy, had triggered something inside me. Something I thought had died along with my life from before. The beeping stopped. The drip returned to its silent, steady rhythm. He looked up, and his eyes met mine. They were a dark brown, but not opaque. They seemed understanding. He smiled at me again. There, it shouldn't bother you anymore. I was breathless for a second. "Thank you," I managed to say. He didn't leave right away. His gaze drifted to my bedside table where my sketchbook lay, the only vestige of my former self I had dared to bring.
Are you an artist?
He asked, his curiosity genuine. No one had asked me that. They asked about my symptoms, about my pain, about whether I had eaten. No one asked about me. I nodded shyly. Art student, or I was.
You are. And illness doesn't take away who you are, Kang So-yeon. It just puts it on pause.
Kang So-yeon? Professor Kim said it as if it were the title of a file. When he said it, it sounded like my name. Sometimes I feel like the pause is permanent, I confessed, surprising myself with my sincerity. He leaned lightly on the edge of my bed, a relaxed posture that further broke the invisible barrier between doctor and patient.
Treatments are tough. It feels like you're climbing an endless mountain in the middle of a snowstorm. But even in the worst storms, if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, you eventually reach the summit. And the view from up there, they say it makes it all worthwhile.
He was silent for a moment, looking at me as if he were assessing whether his words had done any good. Rest, So-yeon. Rest is also part of the climb. If you need anything, or if this machine starts singing opera again, don't hesitate to call. I'll try to come myself. He headed for the door, and before leaving, he turned one last time. By the way, he said, with a playful glint in his eyes, I like blue better. White is boring. Maybe you should start drawing the sky. And he left, closing the door as gently as he had entered. I was left alone in room 703. The silence was no longer oppressive. The beep, beep, beep from the monitor next to me seemed less like an omen and more like a steady heartbeat. I touched the place on my arm where his hand had been with my fingertips. I could still feel an echo of his warmth. The fluttering in my chest had not gone away. It had calmed, turning into a small, warm ember. I looked at my sketchbook. Then I looked out the window. The Seoul sky was a polluted gray, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't see it as a lid over my head. I imagined the blue he spoke of. A cerulean blue, a cobalt blue, an ultramarine blue. I picked up the sketchbook, and for the first time since my world had turned white, I reached for a pencil. His name echoed in my mind, not as a note in a medical record, but as the first note of a forgotten song. Ji-hoon. Three days passed. 3 cycles of gray dawns filtering through my window, of trays of tasteless food, of rounds of nurses with tired smiles, and of the fleeting and icy visit from Professor Kim. 3 days in which the white of the room seemed to regain the ground it had lost. The memory of Dr. Ji-hoon's kindness felt like a fever dream. Had it really happened? Or had my mind, desperate for a sliver of humanity, invented it all? I clung to the memory of his careful touch and his calm voice like a castaway to a plank in the middle of the ocean. I had followed his advice. My sketchbook, which once seemed like a reproach for the life I had lost, was now my accomplice. I ignored the white walls and drew impossible skies. Skies of a deep Prussian blue, swirling with clouds the color of peach and lavender, skies that only existed in my head, but that felt more real than the drip of my IV. On the fourth day, doubt began to eat at me. Maybe he was only kind because he was new to the team. Maybe he saw a tearful patient and felt pity. The idea pricked me with the sharpness of a needle. Pity was almost worse than indifference. It was a reminder of my fragility. That night, I couldn't sleep. The chemotherapy left a metallic aftertaste in my mouth and a ringing in my ears that competed with the vital signs monitor. I tossed and turned in bed. The sheet felt like sandpaper. It was almost 11. The hallway lights were dimmed and the hospital had sunk into a dense, expectant silence. Then, I heard the sound I had been waiting for without realizing it. A soft push on the door. I held my breath. Dr. Ji-hoon's head peeked through the crack. His black hair was even messier than the first time. He looked exhausted. The shadows under his eyes were more pronounced, and his white coat looked wrinkled, a testament to a shift that refused to end. "So-yeon, still awake?" he whispered, his voice a balm in the harsh silence of the night. I could only nod. He entered completely, closing the door behind him with infinite care not to make a noise. In his hand, he held a tablet, the standard shield of all doctors. "I was just stopping by to check your charts before I leave," he said, although his eyes weren't looking at the screen. They were looking at me. It was an excuse as thin as rice paper. He could have checked my data at the nurse's station. He could have done it hours before. We both knew it, and in that shared knowledge, in that small charade, a silent intimacy was born. He approached the bed, and his gaze fell on the open sketchbook on my lap. A starry night sky drawn with fury and longing. "I see you followed my advice," he said, with a small smile that didn't quite dispel his tiredness, but made him seem more real. "It's a beautiful sky." "Thank you." My voice sounded small. He stopped by the visitor's chair, the one my mother used for hours, knitting in silence with a clenched jaw. He didn't sit down immediately. He stood there, observing the drawing. It reminds me of Van Gogh's paintings, the same energy. "Do you like him?" The question took me by surprise. It wasn't, "How are you feeling?" It wasn't, "Have you had nausea?" It was a question about me, about my tastes. Yes, I love him. Starry Night is a cliché, but for a good reason. I feel like he didn't paint what he saw, but what he felt. "I think that's the best definition of art I've ever heard," he said. And finally, he dropped into the chair, letting out a sigh that seemed to carry away the full weight of his day. He ran a hand through his hair, and for a moment, he didn't look like Dr. Ji-hoon. He looked like just Ji-hoon, a tired man at the end of a long day. "Doctor," I dared to ask, "do you like art?" He looked at me, and the connection was instantaneous. We were crossing a threshold. "I like it, although I don't understand much. There's a small gallery in Insadong that I love. They feature new artists. It's quiet. I like to go there on my days off to disconnect, to remember that there's more than illnesses and charts." We talked. We talked for almost an hour. We didn't touch on the subject of lymphoma. We didn't mention chemotherapy. We didn't talk about the prognosis. We talked about the crunchy texture of leaves in autumn, the smell of rain on hot asphalt, the best way to eat jjajangmyeon without staining your shirt. I told him I missed street food, especially the hot tteok filled with sugar and cinnamon that burns your tongue in winter. He told me he grew up near Busan, and that sometimes, when he closed his eyes in the middle of Seoul's chaos, he could still smell the sea. This became our routine, our secret. Not every night, but 2 or 3 times a week after his official shift had ended, the door to room 703 would open softly. He would come in, always with the excuse of the charts, and sit in the visitor's chair, maintaining that respectful physical distance that somehow made the emotional connection feel even more intense. One night, he brought me a book. It was an anthology of poems by Yoon Dong-ju. "I was at a bookstore near here, and I thought you might like this," he said, leaving it on my bedside table as if it were an offering. Words can also paint pictures. I read those poems over and over, finding in them the same longing and the same hope that I felt growing in my chest. Another night, I showed him a drawing I had made of him. It wasn't a realistic portrait. I had drawn him from behind, looking out my room's window towards one of my imaginary skies. It was my way of saying thank you, without having to use words that felt too big and too small at the same time. He looked at it for a long time, in silence. "You have a real gift, So-yeon, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. The romantic tension was an undercurrent in every one of our conversations. It was in the glances that lingered a second longer than necessary, in the shared smiles that appeared out of nowhere, in the way he listened with his entire being, as if my stories about mixing colors were the most important thing in the world. It was in the unspoken rule. He was the doctor, I was the patient. An invisible wall, but as solid as concrete. A silent oath that neither of us dared to name, much less break. One night, almost a month after our first meeting, he arrived later than usual. He looked devastated, the kind of exhaustion that isn't physical, but comes from the soul. He sat in the chair without even bothering to feign the excuse of the tablet. He just stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped. I didn't ask him what had happened. I knew he couldn't tell me. Instead, I waited in silence. The only sound was the beep, beep, beep from the monitor, a heartbeat that now felt like ours, a metronome for our little sanctuary. After several minutes, I said to him in a low voice, "You don't have to do this, doctor. Staying late, you must be tired. Go home and rest." He slowly raised his head. His eyes met mine, and for an instant the barrier between us vanished completely. I saw in his gaze a vulnerability, a sadness, and something more, something that made me hold my breath. His voice was quiet, but it resonated in every corner of the room. "Sometimes, So-yeon, sometimes these are the most important hours of my day." It was a confession. My heart skipped a beat, a flutter so strong I feared the monitor would register it. The air became thick, heavy with everything we couldn't say. He was my doctor, I was his patient. But in that moment, we were just two people finding refuge in each other in the middle of a cold, sterile world. He stood up abruptly, as if he realized he had said too much. The professional mask slipped back into place. "Rest well, So-yeon, he said, his tone formal again, a deliberate step back. He walked to the door, and without looking back, he left. I was left alone, with the echo of his words floating in the air. These are the most important hours of my day. I touched my chest, right over my racing heart. The warmth was no longer a small ember. It was a soft, steady fire that illuminated the white room from within. Our overtime hours, stolen at the end of endless days, had become the real treatment for my soul. And for the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, they were for his too. "8 months. 243 days to be exact. I had counted every one of them. every bag of chemotherapy, every needle, every sleepless night, and now it was all over. Spring had arrived in Seoul without my permission. From the window of room 703, I could see the branches of the cherry trees in the hospital courtyard, laden with defiant pale pink blossoms. They promised a new beginning, a vibrant beauty that felt a million miles away from my reality. My street clothes felt strange on my skin, a pair of jeans and a simple sweatshirt that, before my diagnosis, were my daily uniform, now felt like a costume. My mother had packed my few belongings into a small suitcase. The sketchbook, full of impossible skies and anonymous portraits, lay on top. The book of poems by Yun Dong-ju that Dr. Lee had given me was tucked inside, its pages marked and reread to exhaustion. The atmosphere was festive. Nurses came in and out with wider smiles than usual. My father, who rarely showed emotion, had reddened eyes, but I felt hollow. Leaving the hospital meant getting my life back, but it also meant leaving him, leaving our overtime hours, our silent sanctuary. "It's time, So-yeon," my mother said in a low voice. The hallway leading to the Bell of Hope was crowded. Patients, family members, hospital staff. It was a tradition. Ringing the bell meant victory. It meant you had made it. I walked, feeling their gazes on me. Their applause sounded distant, muffled. I searched for a single face in the crowd, a pair of understanding eyes, a glimpse of messy black hair, but he wasn't there. Professor Kim was, of course, with his entourage, and he gave me an almost imperceptible nod, his highest expression of approval. But Ji-hoon wasn't there. My hand trembled as I grasped the thick rope of the bronze bell. I closed my eyes, and for an instant, I didn't see the crowd, but the memory of a tired smile at 11 at night. I pulled the rope. Clang! The sound was pure, clear, and deafening. It filled the hallway, vibrating in my bones. My parents were crying openly now. The nurses hugged me, and I smiled. A smile that felt like a papier-mâché mask, because the sound of victory also sounded terribly like an ending. I found him later, while my parents were signing the last of the discharge papers. He was standing at the end of a less traveled hallway near a window that looked out at the cherry blossoms. He was wearing his white coat, always the white coat. He turned upon sensing my presence, and a genuine smile, though tinged with melancholy, lit up his face. "Congratulations, Kang So-yeon, see?" I replied, my voice barely a whisper. The formality felt clumsy, painful. We stood in silence, the two of us with meters of space and a universe of unsaid words between us. The spring light came through the window, drying a bright square on the polished floor. "Thank you for everything," I managed to say. And I hoped he would understand that I didn't mean the medications or the charts. I meant the poems, the conversations about the sea, making me feel human again. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "You were a very brave patient." The word patient hit me with unexpected force. That's what I was to him. A case, a job well done. The spiral of insecurity began to form in my stomach. Then he did something that surprised me. He took out his mobile phone. "We'll see each other outside," So-yeon see. And his voice lowered, becoming more intimate. "Where I am no longer your doctor, and you are no longer my patient." My heart stopped, and then began to beat with a wild force. Outside. It was a promise, a bridge to a future I hadn't dared to imagine. With trembling hands, we exchanged numbers. Our fingers brushed for a fraction of a second when he handed the phone back to me. It was an insignificant touch, but it sent an electric shock through my arm. "Send me a message when you get settled," he said, "so I know you arrive safely." "I will." And that was it. He turned and walked down the hallway, his figure framed by his white coat, until he disappeared around a corner. He didn't look back. The first few days at home were strange. My room, which I had longed for months, felt unfamiliar. The silence of the house was overwhelming without the constant beep, beep, beep of the hospital. 2 days after my discharge, my phone buzzed. "I hope you're adjusting well. Remember to take it easy. Ji-hoon." Seeing his name without the doctor title made my heart skip a beat. I replied immediately, "I'm fine, thank you. It's weird to be home. I feel like a stranger." "That feeling will pass. Be patient with yourself. Have you drawn anything?" Our messages continued for 2 weeks. They were little flashes of light in my confusing days. I sent him photos of my first attempts to paint again, of the walks I took around my neighborhood. He told me little anecdotes from his day, always avoiding the grim details of the hospital. Every notification with his name was a promise. But the seed of doubt that Professor Kim had planted, and that the word patient had watered, began to sprout. I started to reread our messages over and over. He's an amazing doctor. Handsome, smart, kind. He could have anyone. Why would he be interested in me? A pale, weak girl who is just learning to live again? Surely he's just being nice, checking on the progress of his former patient. It's his duty. The gratitude I felt for him became entangled with my growing insecurity, creating a poisonous knot. I convinced myself that I was just a reminder of the illness, a professional chapter that he was now closing. Initiating a conversation felt like a burden, as if I were demanding attention that he only gave me out of obligation. So I stopped writing first. The days passed. The silence on my phone was a scream. A week later, one last message arrived. "Is everything okay, So-yeon? The return of the she was like an icy slap. It was his way of taking a step back, of putting me back in my place. He was respecting my space, giving me an honorable way out, and I, in my cowardice, took it. I stared at the message for an hour. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I wrote nothing. Not responding was easier than facing the possibility of rejection. Silence became my answer. 2 months passed. Spring gave way to the sticky heat of early summer. I went back to my art classes, trying to find my rhythm. I pretended I didn't care. I pretended our overtime hours hadn't meant anything more than a temporary escape. But every time my phone vibrated, my heart leaped with a foolish, painful hope. One afternoon, while aimlessly scrolling through social media, I came across the page of an alumni group from a prestigious medical university. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was looking for a punishment. And I found it. A photo of a group of smiling doctors with an hospital logo in the background. And in the center, with the same tired but kind smile that I knew so well, was him. The caption under the photo stole my breath. Giving a warm welcome to Dr. Ji-hoon to the hematology team at Pusan University Hospital. We wish him all the best in his new city and in his subspecialty program. Busan. He had moved. He was hundreds of kilometers away, in another city, starting a new life. A life in which he hadn't bothered to include me, not even with a simple goodbye message. The phone slipped from my fingers and fell silently onto the carpet. The blurry screen, the happy smiles, the word Busan, everything confirmed my worst fear. I had never been part of his outside. I was just a story confined to the white walls of room 703. The promise of spring had been broken, and my heart, in the silence of my room, shattered along with it. Time has a curious way of healing. It sands down the sharp edges of pain, smoothing them into a dull nostalgia. But there are certain wounds, certain absences that do not heal. You simply learn to live with the empty space they left behind. 6 winters have passed. 6 cycles of white breath in the cold air, of thick coats, and of the first snowfall blanketing the city in a mantle of silence. Seoul, Atelier So-yeon Gallery. The opening night, the lights are warm, champagne flows, and the murmur of lively conversations fills the 2-story space. My paintings hang on the impeccable white walls. They are not the turbulent skies of my hospital youth. They are vibrant urban landscapes, portraits full of life, explosions of color that celebrate the beauty in the mundane. They are a testament to survival. So-yeon, they're magnificent! You've captured the soul of the city, exclaims Min-jun, my friend from university, and now a fairly well-known art critic, giving me a bear hug. Thanks for coming, Min-jun. It means a lot to me. I smile. I greet the guests. I accept the congratulations. My hair, now long and dark, falls over my shoulders. I'm wearing a deep blue silk dress that contrasts with the white of the gallery. On the outside, I am the picture of success. Kang So-yeon, the young promise of Korean art who overcame a serious illness and turned her pain into beauty. A perfect story for the magazines. But when the crowd swirls and I'm left alone for an instant, my smile fades. I walk over to the large window overlooking the streets of Gangnam. The neon lights flicker, cars flow like a river of light. It's a night full of life, and yet I feel a pang of loneliness so familiar it has become an old friend. Something is missing, always. Later that night, when the last guest has left and silence finally descends upon the gallery, I go up to my studio on the 2nd floor. The smell of oil paint and turpentine is my true home. I take off my heels, sit on my old wooden stool, and almost by instinct, I open a worn sketchbook. It's not for a new painting, it's for me. My fingers move on their own. The pencil traces a familiar line, the curve of a jaw, a brow slightly furrowed in concentration, the hair always a little messy. A profile I haven't seen in 6 years, but that is seared into my memory. The face of a kind doctor who told me about climbing mountains in the middle of snowstorms. The face of a ghost. 6 years, Kang So-yeon. I scold myself in silence. Why do you keep drawing a ghost? But I can't help it. It's a ritual, an anchor, a way of remembering that the kindness that saved me wasn't just a dream. Pusan University Hospital. 600 kilometers to the south, the air smells of salt and winter. The sea, gray and choppy, crashes against the coast. Inside the hospital, Dr. Ji-hoon, now 38 years old and holding the title of chief specialist in the hematology department, finishes his rounds. His date is confident. His voice is the same as ever, calm, authoritative, but kind. Though now there are small crow's feet at the corners of his eyes when he smiles. Good work today, team. Dr. Park, keep a close watch on the potassium levels of the patient in 302. See you tomorrow. The younger residents admire him. He is known for his brilliance, his dedication, and his infinite patience. He is the kind of doctor everyone aspires to be. Later in the break room, Dr. Park, a cheerful and meddlesome resident, approaches him with a cup of coffee.
Professor Lee, she says, using his formal title. My cousin is a pharmacist. She's very pretty, loves movies, and she's single. I thought maybe you two. Ji-hoon takes the coffee and offers her a tired smile. It's the third time this month someone has tried to set him up on a blind date. I appreciate the gesture, Dr. Park. Truly. But I'm too busy with research. I wouldn't have time to devote to anyone. It's his standard response, a polite excuse that no one entirely believes anymore. He retreats to his office, a tidy and minimalist space. He sits in his chair and looks out the window. He doesn't see the lights of Busan, but seems to be looking beyond, to the north. His life is a professional success. Published articles, conferences, lives saved. It's exactly what he set out to do. But the nights are long, and his apartment, impeccably clean and with a view of the sea, feels empty. Something is missing. Always. He opens his desk drawer. Inside, next to medical manuals and pens, is a small book of poems with a slightly worn cover. He takes it out. He doesn't need to open it. He perfectly remembers the poem she said was her favorite, one about counting the stars on a dark night. He wonders what became of her. He looked her up online once, years ago. He saw that she graduated with honors. He saw the announcement of a small group exhibition. He felt a surge of pride so intense it hurt. But he daren't to contact her. She had chosen silence, and he had chosen to respect it. It was his self-imposed punishment for having crossed a line, even if it only in his heart. He closes the drawer. The memory of a pale girl with an artist's eyes in a white hospital room is a ghost that accompanies him, a constant reminder that medicine can cure the body, but there are other ailments, those of the soul, for which it has no remedy. 6 winters have passed. In Seoul, a successful artist secretly draws the face of her savior. In Busan, a respected doctor treasures the memory of the patient who reminded him why he chose his path. Both are surrounded by the fruits of their labor, healthy, alive, successful. But both are alone, living parallel lives of silent longing, not knowing that the other shares the exact same void. Destiny, however, is a patient artist, and after 6 long winters, it was about to reveal its masterpiece.
I hate these things, I murmured, swirling the champagne in my glass and watching the bubbles slowly die. I know, but the director of the Korea Art Trust is by the ice fountain, and he's been asking about your new nocturnal landscape series. Smile and pretend you're having fun. It's good for business. Min-jun replied beside me, ever the pragmatic gallery owner. I adjusted my blue dress and forced a smile. We were in the grand ballroom of the Sheila Hotel at a medical charity gala. An ocean of black suits and silk dresses moved under the light dripping from a cascade of crystal chandeliers. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. For an artist, it was a strangely dead canvas, full of figures but empty of soul. Min-jun had dragged me here with the promise of introducing me to potential patrons and necessary torture in my line of work. I felt like an imposter, a girl who used to find comfort in the smell of turpentine, now navigating a sea of superficial conversations about property prices in Seoul and the latest corporate mergers. Every smile felt like a crack in my facade. I'm going to get some air, I told Min-jun, needing a break. He nodded, already immersed in a conversation with the woman wearing a diamond necklace large enough to pay my rent for a year. I slipped through the crowd, looking for a quiet corner. My eyes scanned the room without registering anything. Unfocused. Anonymous faces, silent laughter, exaggerated gestures. It was like looking at a poorly composed painting. My mind was already in my studio thinking about a mix of ultramarine blue and ivory black that I needed to perfect. And then, I saw him. Or rather, I felt a presence before I saw it. Across the room, near a marble pillar, there was a figure. A man with his back to me, talking to an elegant woman in an emerald dress. There was something about his posture, a stillness, a calm that seemed out of place amidst all the hustle and bustle. My heart gave a small, stupid leap. Don't be ridiculous, So-yeon. There are thousands of tall men in suits in Seoul. But then he turned slightly. Time stopped. No, it shattered. It broke into pieces. The murmur of the room faded to a dull hum in my ears. The crystal cascade of the chandeliers became a blur of light. All that existed in the universe was that man. He was older, of course. 6 years had carved a new maturity into his face. His hair, though combed and shorter, still had that stubborn tendency to want to stand up on one side. The tailored black suit fit him like a glove, but I couldn't stop imagining him in a wrinkled white coat. It was him, Ji-hoon. He was a ghost. My ghost. And he was here. As if feeling the weight of my gaze across the crowded room, he lifted his head. His eyes swept over the crowd, and for a fraction of a second that felt like an eternity, they met mine. I saw the exact moment he recognized me. His eyes widened slightly. His conversation stopped mid-word. The professional smile he was offering his companion froze and vanished. The entire world, with all its noise and glamour, was reduced to the distance between us. 6 years, 100 meters, an entire lifetime. I don't know who moved first. I think it was both of us at the same time. Excuse me for a moment, I whispered to nothing because Min-jun was no longer by my side. I started to walk. Not run, it was a slow, deliberate movement as if an invisible string were pulling me towards him. People moved out of my way, or maybe I just didn't see them. I saw him say something to the woman in the emerald dress who looked at him in confusion. And then he started to walk too. Every step was a thunderclap in my chest. He's here. He's not in Busan. He's here. He's going to talk to me. What am I going to say? How do I look? Do I look sick? No, you look healthy. Is that good? Or has he forgotten me? No, he hasn't forgotten you. I saw it in his eyes.
Finally, the distance closed. We stopped, an arm's length from each other. The noise of the real world came rushing back in. I could smell his cologne, a subtle scent of sandalwood and something clean. He looked at me with an intensity that stole my breath. "So-yeon shi?" he said, his voice. It was the same deep, calm voice, but now it had a different nuance, one I couldn't decipher. The use of she was like an echo from room 703. "Dr. Lee," I replied, my own voice trembling. Old habits clung on tightly. A dozen emotions crossed his face. Surprise, relief, something that looked painfully like joy. "Not here," he said, his gaze shifting to the people who were beginning to notice our little scene. "Can we?"
He motioned with his head towards large glass doors at the end of the hall, the terrace. I nodded, unable to form words. Without a second glance at our respective companions, we turned and walked towards those doors. I felt Min-jun's gaze on my back, but I didn't care. Nothing mattered. We pushed open the doors, and the cold Seoul night air hit us. It was a welcome shock, clearing my head. We were on a wide stone terrace, overlooking the infinite twinkling lights of the city. The noise of the party was left behind, replaced by the distant murmur of traffic. We stood in silence for a moment, both breathing in the cold air. "You have long hair," he finally said. The simplest and yet most significant observation. It meant, "You are alive. You are healthy. Time has passed." A small, nervous laugh escaped me. "And you're not wearing a white coat anymore. You look good." He smiled, and it was as if the sun had risen after 6 years of winter. The same genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I read about your gallery in an art magazine, Atelier So-yeon." I felt very proud. My heart stopped. You read that?" "Of course I did. I wanted to come to the opening, but I didn't think it was my place." The air between us crackled. 6 years of questions, of doubts, of silent pain, all swirled in the space that separated us. "I heard you moved to Busan," I said, the phrase that had haunted me for years. He looked at me, and his smile faded, replaced by a shadow of regret. "I did, for a subspecialty. I came back to Seoul a year ago. So-yeon, The conversation began to flow. Awkward at first, then with more ease, as if we were reconnecting the wires of a telephone line cut long ago. It was as if not a single day had passed, and at the same time, as if 1,000 lifetimes had passed. The ease, the comfort of our nightly chats in room 703 was there, waiting patiently under layers of time and misunderstanding. He's here. The phrase resonated in my head like a bell, the bell of hope I had rung 6 years ago. He's really here. "24 hours passed, an entire day in which the world had changed color.
The monotonous gray of my solitary existence had been tinged with the vibrant hues of a possibility I had buried long ago. Last night, after we said goodbye at the door of my gallery with a clumsy but electrifying promise to see each other again, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake, watching the dawn paint the Seoul sky with his number saved on my phone, a number that was no longer a ghost, but a real connection. The message, "Good night, So-yeon, rest," was still on my screen, and I read it over and over as if it were a sacred poem. Tonight, as I got ready, I felt the same nervousness a student feels before her first date. What should I wear? I rummaged through my closet, discarding the elegant dresses I wore for openings and the paint-stained jeans from my studio life. Finally, I chose something simple: a pair of clean-cut black trousers and a cream-colored cashmere sweater. I wanted him to see So-yeon, not the artist. When I met him at the entrance of Namsan Park, my heart was hammering against my ribs. He was wearing a dark jacket over a simple shirt. No suit, no white coat, just Ji-hoon. He smiled at me, and that smile erased the 6 years in a single blow. "I didn't want to take you to a noisy place," he said, offering me a cup of hot coffee he had brought. "I thought a walk would be better." "It's perfect," I replied, and my fingers brushed against his as I took the cup. The small electric shock was still there, as powerful as ever. We began to walk along the illuminated path that wound up the mountainside. The night air was cool and smelled of pine. Below, Seoul stretched out like a blanket of fallen stars, an ocean of twinkling lights. In the distance, the Namsan Tower stood like a lighthouse, its green light indicating that the air quality was good. A good night, a good omen. We talked. We filled the enormous voids of the last 6 years. I told him about the struggle to go back to university, the joy of graduating, the terror and excitement of opening my own gallery. He told me about his subspecialty in Busan, how much he missed Seoul, his decision to return to work at a research center. Every word was a balm, but beneath the easy conversation there was a current of tension, a silent question that floated between us, the question of why. At a quiet viewpoint, away from the other strolling couples, we stopped by the railing. The view was breathtaking, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. It was he who broke the emotionally charged silence. He turned to look at me, and the lightness of our chat vanished, replaced by a seriousness that made me hold my breath. "So-yeon," he began, his voice barely a murmur, "there's something I need you to know. Something I should have told you 6 years ago." My heart sank. "I thought you had forgotten me," I confessed in a low voice, the insecurity of so many years coming to the surface. The silence, I interpreted it as a confirmation. I saw the pain reflected in his eyes. It was the pain of my pain. He said, and his voice was heavy with regret, "I know my silence hurt you, and not a single day has passed in these 6 years that I haven't regretted it. It was never pity, So-yeon, and certainly I never forgot you." He took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to dive into deep and painful waters. "At the hospital, I was your doctor. I had to be. But every night I spent in your room talking about art and street food, that line became more and more blurred for me. You became my anchor. You were this incredibly brave young woman, full of so much light, trapped in such a dark place. You reminded me why I chose medicine in the first place. And to be honest, I got scared. I got scared of how much I came to care about you." My eyes filled with tears. He continued, "When you were discharged, I wanted to call you every day. I wanted to take you to that gallery in Insadong,
I wanted to do all the things we talked about, but I would look at you, and I saw you as so fragile. You had just won a war against your own body. The last thing you needed was for your doctor, a living symbol of hospitals, needles, and pain, to drag you back into all of that. He looked at me again, and I saw a vulnerability in him I had never seen before. The self-assured doctor was gone. This was just Ji-hoon. You needed to heal, So-yeon, away from everything that reminded you of that place, and that included me. Letting you go, respecting your silence when you stopped writing was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I did it because, in my mistaken doctor's head, I thought it was what was best for you. A single tear rolled down my cheek, then another. They were not tears of sadness, they were tears of liberation. The weight of 6 years of feeling abandoned, of believing that I wasn't enough, was dissolving into the night air. His silence had not been rejection, it had been a sacrifice. With a hesitation that broke my heart, he reached out and, for the first time, took my hand. His hand was warm and strong, the first touch that was not clinical or accidental. It was a choice. I was wrong, he said, his thumbs stroking my knuckles. I should have fought harder. I should have had more faith in you and in what I was feeling. I should have told you all this then. So-yeon, he squeezed my hand, his eyes pleading. If you'll let me, I would desperately like a second chance, a chance to start over, here, under this sky, without white coats or hospital rooms, a chance to care for you as I have wanted to for 6 winters. A chance to love you properly. I couldn't speak. The lump in my throat was too big. So I just nodded, the tears now flowing freely. Through my blurry vision, I saw his face flooded with a relief so deep that it made me sob. Yes, he whispered, needing to hear it. Yes, I managed to say, my voice broken by emotion and joy, a shaky laugh mixed with my tears. Yes, Ji-hoon. He closed the distance between us and cupped my face with his free hand. His gaze sought mine, asking for one last permission. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a movie kiss. It was 1,000 times better. It was tender, salty from my tears. It was a kiss laden with the weight of 6 years of longing, of misunderstandings, of lonely nights. It was a promise. It was a homecoming. When we parted, I rested my forehead on his, closing my eyes. The cold of the night had vanished, replaced by a warmth that radiated from my chest. The Namsan Tower glowed in the distance. I'm home, I thought. For the first time in 6 years, the empty space inside me was full. Finally, I was home.
"5 years have passed since our first official date under the Namsan Tower. 11 years since a doctor with messy hair walked into room 703 and told me about the color blue. Sometimes when I stop to think about it, the enormity of that time and the improbability of our story still take my breath away. Our apartment in Seoul is a reflection of us. The walls are painted a warm white, but they are covered in color. My paintings, large and bold, mix with Ji-hoon's bookshelves overflowing with medical books and mystery novels. There is a slight, organized mess that speaks of a life well lived. It smells like home. It smells like peace. Tonight's the aroma of galbi-jim. I'm in the kitchen adding the chestnuts and dates to the stew when I feel 2 arms wrap around my waist and a soft kiss on the back of my neck. It smells incredible, Jagiya, Ji-hoon murmurs, resting his chin on my shoulder.
Don't try to taste it yet, I scold him gently, tapping his hand. It's for dinner. My sister will complain if there isn't enough. He laughs, a low, warm sound that is still my favorite music in the world. I just wanted to steal a hug from my wife. Is that forbidden too? I turn in his arms and give him a quick kiss. Hugs are unlimited. His face is no longer that of a young resident. The years have granted him a quiet dignity, but his eyes still have the same kind, understanding glint that rescued me so long ago. Our love is no longer a fragile, forbidden connection. It is an oak, strong, deep, and secure. My older sister, Yeon arrives with her husband, Park Min-soo. Min-soo is a young surgical resident in his 3rd year, perpetually nervous and full of an energy that reminds me of an enthusiastic puppy. He adores my sister and holds an almost comical reverence for Ji-hoon. "Hyungnim," he says, bowing deeply to Ji-hoon. "Thank you for having us." "Min-soo, I've told you 1,000 times to call me Ji-hoon. We're family," my husband replies with a patient smile. But Min-soo simply can't. To him, Ji-hoon is Professor Lee, an eminence in the medical field he aspires to belong to. The dinner passes with laughter and lively chatter. Yeon tells embarrassing anecdotes from our childhood, and I get my revenge by revealing the disaster that was her first attempt at cooking for Min-soo. It's a perfect night, normal in its perfection, and I feel overwhelmed with gratitude. The memory of the white room is like a faded photograph from another life. This, right here, is my reality. "Min-soo, how is your new rotation in hematology?" my sister asks. "You've been so stressed lately." Min-soo puts down his chopsticks and lets out a dramatic sigh. "Oh, Nuna, it's a nightmare." Well, not a nightmare, but it's intense. The new department head is a legend, an absolute genius. But Aiku, he's so demanding. I look at Ji-hoon, who is sipping his tea, and a small smile plays on my lips. Not a single detail gets past him, Min-soo continues, now in full adorable complaint mode. He checks every chart, every analysis, every note. He expects absolute perfection. If you make a mistake, he doesn't yell at you. Even worse, he asks you a calm question that makes you realize the stupidity of your mistake on your own. It's terrifying. Ji-hoon chokes slightly on his tea. He tries to cover it with a cough, but I see his shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. I start to feel a tingle of amusement. But everyone respects him. He saves patients that other doctors had given up on. He's like a machine. Professor Lee Ji-hoon must not sleep. A brief silence falls over the table. Yeon and Min-soo continue eating, but Ji-hoon and I look at each other. Our eyes meet over the plates of banchan. In his gaze, I see the reflection of mine, the surprise, the irony, the incredible, perfect symmetry of destiny. I see room 703, the broken promise of spring, the lights of the Shilla Hotel, and the confession under the moon. I see our entire history contained in a single shared glance. And then, the bubble of laughter bursts. It's not a giggle. It's an open, loud, liberating laugh. I laugh so hard, my sides hurt. Ji-hoon laughs with me, his deep laughter echoing in the dining room. My sister and my brother-in-law look at us as if we've gone crazy. What's so funny? Yeonju asks, confused. Min-soo looks offended. It's not funny. My suffering is real. I tried to catch my breath, wiping a tear of laughter from the corner of my eye. I reach across the table and take Ji-hoon's hand. Our fingers intertwine with perfect familiarity. "Honey," I say to Min-soo, my voice still trembling with laughter, "I'm afraid the terrifying and demanding genius you're complaining about is my husband." The expression on Park Min-soo's face is a work of art.
His eyes go wide as saucers. His mouth opens and closes like a fish out of water. He looks at Ji-hoon, then at me, and then back at Ji-hoon, whose kind smile must now seem incredibly sinister to him. The color drains from his face. Professor Lee? You are... Oh no. That night, after my sister took her traumatized husband home, Ji-hoon and I stood on the balcony, looking at the city lights. The air is cool, and I snuggle against his side. He puts an arm around my shoulders. My poor boy. I think he'll be requesting a transfer to dermatology tomorrow. I'll give him a higher grade for making us laugh so hard. We stand in a comfortable silence, watching the world go on its course below us. I think about love. I think about our particular equation, one that defied ethics, time, and distance. I think about how our love began, like a silent oath in a sterile hospital room, a secret kept between a doctor and his patient. Now, that love is this: a noisy family dinner, a shared joke, a hand holding mine with a quiet certainty. It's no longer a secret. It's the foundation of my life. A promise fulfilled, in plain sight for all to see.